My name is Sarah Jane LeBlanc, and this is my animal communication breakthrough.
Hi, Sarah Jane. I'm wondering, you're so accomplished already, and I'm wondering where you started, because where does somebody like you who is doing so much these days in animal communication, how did you begin? Some people I know start at birth, but where did you get your beginnings?
Well, I definitely did not start at birth, and I think it's only fair to say that I never had any desire or any interest in animal communication. I didn't even know it existed. So I don't think I actually chose to start anywhere because it was never a choice. It was something that wasn't ever on my radar. And to be really upfront, honest, and transparent, and I always am about this, and it surprises a lot of people, but I didn't even like animals. So I was terrified of animals. So I have to say that that's shifted, absolutely shifted now. But my dislike of animals was actually fear. It was a really, really deep rooted fear. I was terrified of dogs, all animals, but dogs especially. So I never had any relationships with animals when I was growing up. I stayed away from animals as an adult, and so the idea of ever working with animals was not in my game plan at all. So with that background, I never actually made a choice to start anywhere. It just kind of happened because clearly it's what I was meant to do. So my starting point was when I had trained as an energy practitioner. So I was already working with energy with people. And some clients had asked me to work with their animals. And I said no, because I didn't want to work with animals. I'm scared of animals. So I would recommend that they go and see other practitioners that I knew worked with animals. And then one night, I was reading my book before I went to bed. I was in bed, still awake, but sleepy, but definitely awake. And as I switched off my light and put my book aside, I just got this image of a dog. I knew it was a collie. I recognised the breed. So a tri-coloured collie behind my closed eyes, but I was definitely awake. And then I just began to feel all these emotions. And I think it was maybe about half an hour, 40 minutes, just lying in my bed having this experience. And yes, it was bizarre. Never had anything like it before. But at the same time, it kind of just felt okay as well. So there's that kind of dual thing going on. This is so weird, strange. Oh my goodness, what's happening? But at the same time, there was a real calmness and a real sense of this is okay, and it's okay. Just go with it. And I just went with it, and it felt quite natural. So that was my breakthrough, I suppose. That was that was my moment of my world changing.
Okay.
Because in the morning, I got up and I thought, what on earth was that about last night? And I said to my husband, and he said to me, please promise me you won't tell anybody what's happened. They used to burn witches at the stake for far less than that. And so he was just worried about me, and just I think he thought I was losing it a little bit. So that was where it started. I just started looking and seeing what this was, and I didn't even know what to call it.
Yeah.
I didn't even have a name for what happened to me. So that was where it started. So a
No,
bit different from most people.
yeah, definitely. And normally I would say your fear of animals would be your biggest challenge and barrier to this, but that didn't even come into play before this happened. So was it smooth sailing after this opened up for you? Did you just get right in?
Um, well, I think my biggest challenge was believing in myself. That was my biggest challenge because there was a part of me that, as bizarre as it all was, there was a bigger part of me that was just going with it and just being okay with it. And because it happened in that distant way, so there wasn't an animal in front of me, the fear thing never came up. But I didn't know who the dog was. But because I'd felt the dog's emotions, I was really worried about this dog, and I knew that I needed help. And I didn't know how to do that because I didn't know whose dog it was. So that's probably a whole other story. But if I'll just cut to that piece just so that I can finish that off for everyone. So parallel to all of this, we ended up with a puppy. So that's a whole other story. So I was taking this puppy to puppy training classes, and the woman and the dog had told me his name was Dan. And at the dog training class, the woman was explaining the training that we were to do with our dogs. And she said, for example, my dog Dan, and I just knew every bit in my body said, oh, it's her dog. Now, the dog training was lovely, and I got to know her really well. She's such a huge heart for dogs. But as a newbie to this kind of world, she looked like a sergeant major, she walked like a sergeant major, and she talked like a sergeant major. I thought, how the heck am I going to tell her that her dogs come and talk to me late at night? So that's where my head was through the whole dog training exercise. So when we had to do it, didn't have a clue because I hadn't been listening. I was just thinking, how am I going to tell this woman about her dog? So I got over all of that, and we had the conversation, and so that actually we got Dan sorted out. So that was the start of it, and she was brilliant about it all. So I think the real challenge for me was just believing in myself. I believed that this had happened to me for a reason. You know, with my history of fear of all animals, dogs especially, I knew by what had happened to Dan, the way it happened, I just trusted that God, the universe, you know, this was in somebody else's big plan for me. So I trusted that completely. And I believed that I was meant to do this.
Mm-hmm.
But the belief in myself was the hard part. And even though, you know, I'd ask people at the dog training classes if I could practice with their animals and things like, or their dogs and other animals. You know, even though that all went really well, the believing in myself, believing not so much that it was real, I knew that it was real, but believing that I was good enough.
Mm.
That was my big challenge.
You mean like accurate enough with the
Yeah, yeah,
information? And,
yeah, yeah, yeah. And if I was going to be doing this, and I never charged anybody for about a year, so that's how little, you know, confidence I had in my own abilities. Thought, well, if it's free, you know, they can't moan or complain, you know, because I haven't charged them anything. So for that first year, I just practiced and didn't charge anybody. And I think my big breakthrough moment was when my work was featured in a newspaper. And although that might sound like a breakthrough, as in a breakthrough into the media, that wasn't really the breakthrough. There was about me no longer being able to hide,
mm,
and it was kind of like I'd been pushed out there. You know, I'd been presented out, you know, through the feature um, into the world, if you like. So I couldn't hide anymore. And I think in terms of, you know, you asked, you know, how did, you know, where I am now, you know, how did I get from where I started to now? I think that was a huge catalyst because I couldn't hide anymore. You know, it was out there. It was in the paper. My face was in the paper. My name was in the paper. People knew who I was and what I did. I couldn't hide. I couldn't pretend anymore. So that was my big breakthrough, because I had to finally just learn to trust myself and trust the animals,
mm-hmm,
you know, because it's also when we doubt ourselves, we're actually doubting the animals too.
mm-hmm.
So it was really kind of getting over that. That was probably my biggest breakthrough, was just not hiding anymore.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Scary as well though.
It's interesting that your realization that you could do this, plus getting past your biggest challenge, sort of not were given to you, but they were kind of thrust upon you,
Yeah,
and you had to deal with them. But it was still that it was that strong that they were just thrust on you, and you had to take them if you wanted them and use them. And look at you now. You're so now you're did that just kind of move on from there? That was your biggest, and it,
Yeah. And I think what you said really important, Josh, because it did feel thrust upon me. This was not a decision that I made. I've worked with hundreds of students, met hundreds of people, and everybody's decided, right, I want to do this. That wasn't my path. I didn't decide this. If you had ever said to me, you're going to be working with animals, I would have said, no, that's never, ever, ever was on my radar at all. So you're right. There was this feeling of it kind of being thrust upon me. So rather than it being a conscious decision that I made, it felt much more like like I was in a kind of car chase,
mhm.
and I wasn't even driving the car. Somebody else was driving it, and there was twists and turns and dead ends and no map, no idea where it was going. We took wrong turns, we went down dead ends, and it was that feeling of not knowing what the destination was going to be, but always trusting. I did have that trust because it had been thrust on me. I believed that it had been thrust on me for a reason, and so I had to trust that we would reach or I would reach the destination, and I've reached the destination. So I'm
That,
very grateful.
yeah, it's really amazing because it's quite a different path than many people take
Very,
who really
yeah,
who have this goal to do this, and that they'll have challenges along the way, and there's a lot of support for that you can find to get past those challenges. But you were, like you said, you're kind of going blind, not knowing where you're going to end up. And the
yep.
trust is incredible that you kept that, because what else do you have other than the trust to keep you going forward?
That was it. And to be clear as well, at the time, people around, like close people, really close family members that loved me, wanted the best for me, they were all questioning, whether I was having some kind of midlife crisis. There was all of that talk going on as well. It's like, she's just packed in her job, and she's going to be doing therapy work. And I think my grandfather, God love him, he died last year, but he did apparently said, what? She thinks she can talk to animals now? No, whatever next. It was that kind of thing that was going on around me with friends and family, because they were worried. Here was me saying, I can hear animals talking, and yet they all knew that my whole life I'd been terrified of animals, and I didn't have anything to do with animals at all. I actively avoided being around animals. So yeah, the trust was huge. It
Mhm.
was really huge. And I think for me, and I've never really thought about it, Josh, so I really appreciate this moment, because it's like a little light bulb's gone off that I hadn't thought about before. And I think without realizing it, I think I knew that I was being gifted something, and that it would be disrespectful to not trust what had been given. It would be ungrateful to not trust what had been given, because if I'd been given it, I'd been given it for a reason. And it wasn't okay for me to just throw that away.
Yes.
And I don't think I ever had thought about it like that before
Yeah.
until just now. And yeah, I think that was what kept the trust going. It's like, well, if I've been given this, then it's what I'm meant to do. So if somebody's gifted this to me, it's part of my life plan, even though I didn't plan it, then I need to just see this right the way through. And
Yeah.
that's what I
And
did.
so, and you saw it through, and where are you now? Where did it end up for you at this point?
So at this point, I'm actually fulfilling my absolute soul's purpose and my dream job with animal communication, and that's teaching students. So
Oh.
that was my plan maybe 10 years ago. And so I started training other people about 10 years ago. And then maybe about 8 years ago, I wanted to up that and look at providing a professional training program. So not just teaching people how to do the basics, but really taking them the whole way. So now I train people to do what I do, and I'm just so happy to do that. I couldn't think of a better job.
Oh,
So lucky.
that's great. That's so great to hear.
And can I just say something as well, because you mentioned a moment ago about my route being very different. You know, the path that I've taken is very different from everybody else.
Mhm.
And I just want to say something in case anybody's thinking, well, do you know what? Great for you, Sarah Jane. You know, I didn't get thrust into that gift, and I don't even know if I can do it. So this is what I want to say to people that are thinking, oh well, that was really lucky for you, but that's not where I'm at, and I'm stuck and I'm struggling and I don't know if I can do this. So I'm really clear on that. I came into this, and I believe it happened because it was meant to. Okay, so you know that there was a bigger purpose playing out for sure. However, we've all got our purpose, and if it was left to me, this is not what I would be doing because I didn't even know this was possible. I just wouldn't be here. So I was clearly meant to be here. But I came into this with no relationships with animals, fearing animals, and at that time having a distrust and a dislike because of my fear. And so what I'm really, really clear about and passionate about is that if I can get to here from that starting point, then if you already love animals and you already want to make a difference in the lives of animals, then you're starting 10 steps ahead of where I did. And with the right support, you can get to where you want to get to.
Yes, that's yeah. That's a good point because I think most of the people I meet are the ones who love animals already and have always loved them. They have their own challenges. We all do. We all have our own blocks and hurdles. But you're right. You came a long way from not even liking animals to doing this. And if it's a huge leap. So congratulations.
Massive.